Everyone, meet the biggest mistake I ever made. Hold your head high. You've done nothing wrong.
I'm not afraid anymore.
What is happening?
The grand ballroom erupted in laughter as Otieno Odiambo raised his champagne glass and pointed toward the lonely woman standing at the entrance. Everyone, he smirked, meet the biggest mistake I ever made. Dressed in a simple navy dress, Achieng Atieno stood perfectly still while whispers spread across the room. Then the laughter died. Outside, a convoy of black luxury SUVs rolled to the red carpet. A tall billionaire stepped out, walked straight past the stunned guests, and gently offered Achieng his hand. Suddenly, the same people who had mocked her lowered their heads in respect. What did this powerful man know about the woman her ex-husband believed was worthless? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. We'd love to know where our story is reaching today. And if you enjoy heartfelt stories about justice, hope, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next journey. Long before anyone knew the names of wealthy investors or luxury hotels, before expensive suits replaced worn-out shirts and pride replaced gratitude, Achieng Atieno and Otieno Odiambo had been two ordinary young people chasing the same impossible dream. They first met in Kisumu on the eastern shores of Lake Victoria. Every morning, Achieng walked through the crowded Kibuye market, carrying a woven basket filled with fresh vegetables that her widowed mother grew on a tiny piece of rented land. She was only 23, but hardship had taught her discipline long before adulthood officially arrived. She smiled easily, spoke gently to everyone, and somehow remembered the names of nearly every customer who stopped by her stall. People trusted her because she never cheated anyone. If an elderly woman came with only half the money needed for tomatoes, Achieng quietly added extra vegetables without saying a word. "If you eat well today," she would say with a warm smile, "you can pay me another day." Many never did. She never asked, not because she was rich, because she understood hunger. Only a few streets away, Otieno worked at a small electronics repair shop owned by an aging technician. Every day he repaired broken radios, old mobile phones, and second-hand televisions brought in by customers who could not afford replacements. His hands were skilled. His dreams were even bigger. Whenever business slowed, he would stare through the shop window toward the modern buildings rising across the city. One day, he often whispered to himself, "I'll work in one of those offices." Unlike many young men around him, Otieno believed education could change everything. After work, he attended evening business classes at a local college. He was exhausted almost every day, but he never stopped studying. Their first conversation happened by accident. One rainy afternoon, the sky suddenly opened. Vendors rushed to cover their goods, while customers ran for shelter. Otieno had just finished repairing an old radio when he noticed a young woman struggling to protect baskets of vegetables from the heavy rain. Without thinking twice, he sprinted across the muddy road. "Let me help," he called. Together, they dragged the baskets beneath a nearby roof. Both were completely soaked. For several seconds, they simply laughed. The rain had turned the market into chaos. Achieng brushed wet hair away from her face. "Thank you." It wasn't much. It was. She handed him a ripe mango from her basket. "For saving today's business." Otieno smiled. I think I earned at least one mango." That simple conversation became another the following day. Then another. Soon Otieno found reasons to pass through the market even when he had no deliveries nearby. Sometimes he bought fruit he didn't need. Sometimes he simply walked beside her while she closed her stall for the evening. Their friendship grew slowly. Neither tried to impress the other. There were no expensive dates, No fancy restaurants. Their favorite place became a quiet hill overlooking Lake Victoria. They often sat together after sunset, watching fishermen guide tiny boats across the shimmering water while city lights slowly appeared behind them. "What do you want most in life?" Achieng asked one evening. Otieno looked toward the horizon. "I don't want to stay poor forever." She nodded. "I understand. I want to build something important." "You will." "You sound very sure." "I am," he laughed. "You believe in me more than I believe in myself." Achieng smiled. "Someone has to." Months later, their friendship quietly became love. Neither made dramatic promises. Neither owned anything valuable. But they shared something stronger than comfort. They trusted each other completely. When Otieno finished his diploma with excellent grades, Achieng cried louder than anyone else during the graduation ceremony. She clapped until her hands hurt. "You're going to change your life," she told him proudly. "Our life," he corrected. "Our life." A year later, they married in a small church outside Kisumu. Only close family members attended. The reception took place beneath a large white tent borrowed from neighbors. Friends cooked traditional meals together. Children danced across the dusty yard. Someone played old Luo songs through worn speakers that frequently stopped working. Nobody cared. It was one of the happiest days either of them had ever known. After the wedding, they moved to Nairobi. Life there proved much harder than they had imagined. The city offered opportunity. It also demanded sacrifice. Their first apartment consisted of one tiny room with cracked walls and a leaking roof. When rain fell, buckets covered nearly half the floor. The kitchen was barely large enough for one person. The bathroom was shared with several neighboring families. Electricity failed almost every week. Still, every evening, they thanked God for having somewhere to sleep. Otieno searched endlessly for office work. Week after week, companies rejected him. "We've selected another candidate." "You don't have enough experience." "We'll contact you." Nobody ever did. Eventually, he accepted temporary administrative jobs that paid little more than survival wages. Meanwhile, Achieng woke before sunrise every day. She found work cleaning offices before employees arrived. After finishing there, she sold homemade chapati and tea outside a busy bus station. In the evenings, she washed clothes for nearby families. Her days stretched from before dawn until long after sunset, yet she rarely complained. Whenever Otieno apologized for not earning enough, she squeezed his hand. "This season won't last forever. You deserve better. I chose you. You chose poverty. I chose the man I love." Those words stayed with him. Months became years. Money remained scarce. Some evenings, they shared only one simple meal. Other nights, they quietly pretended not to be hungry, so the other person would eat more. When rent increased unexpectedly, Achieng made a difficult decision. Without telling Otieno first, she sold the only gold necklace her late father had given her before he died. It was her most treasured possession. The money paid 3 months of rent. That evening, Otieno noticed the necklace was missing. "Where is it?" She hesitated. "I sold it." His face fell. "Achieng, we needed the rent. It belonged to your father. I still have his memories. You should have told me. If I had, you would have stopped me." He lowered his eyes. "I'm failing you." "No. I'm supposed to protect this family." "You are." "How?" "By refusing to give up." For the first time in months, Otieno cried. Not because of poverty, because someone still believed in him. Inspired by her faith, he enrolled in additional certification courses at night, hoping stronger qualifications would open better opportunities. Tuition cost more than they could afford. Again, Achieng quietly found extra work. She braided hair on weekends. She baked mandatsi before sunrise. She skipped buying new clothes for nearly 2 years. Every shilling she saved went toward Otieno's education. Friends questioned her decisions. Why sacrifice so much? What if he changes after becoming successful? She always answered the same way. Love isn't measured when life is easy. Otieno eventually completed every course with distinction. One afternoon, he received a call inviting him to interview at a respected investment company in Nairobi. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the phone. When he shared the news, Achieng wrapped both arms around him. "I told you," she whispered through tears. "Your time is coming." Neither of them realized that this opportunity would indeed change everything, but not in the way either of them had imagined. Far beyond the glass towers of Nairobi's financial district, success was waiting. So were pride, temptation, and choices that would test whether love built in poverty could survive the seductive promises of wealth. The headquarters of Kiongozi Capital overlooked Nairobi's bustling business district, its glass walls reflecting both the morning sun and the ambitions of everyone who entered. When Otieno Odhiambo walked through its revolving doors on his first day as a junior financial analyst, he felt as though he had stepped into another world. Men wore tailored suits that cost more than his monthly salary. Women carried designer handbags he had only seen in magazine advertisements. Luxury cars lined the underground parking garage. Employees discussed investment portfolios over imported coffee instead of worrying about bus fare or grocery prices. Otieno stood quietly in the lobby for a moment. Everything he had dreamed about was finally within reach. That evening, he rushed home with excitement written across his face. Achieng was waiting inside their tiny apartment with a simple meal of rice sukuma wiki and fried fish. Before he could even speak, she smiled. "You got the job." "How did you know? I could see it on your face." He laughed and embraced her. "We're finally going to be okay." She held him tightly. "No," she whispered. "We're finally beginning." For the first few months, nothing about Otieno changed. He still took crowded buses to work. He still carried lunch prepared by Achieng every morning. He still kissed her forehead before leaving the apartment. Whenever he received his salary, the first thing he did was place the money in her hands. "We earned this together," he would say. Those words filled Achieng with hope. She believed their years of sacrifice had finally been rewarded. Slowly, however, success began introducing Otieno to people who measured human worth very differently. One afternoon, several senior colleagues invited him to lunch at an expensive restaurant. It was his first time eating in such a place. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath soft lighting. Waiters addressed customers as Sir and Madam. Conversations revolved around luxury holidays, golf clubs, imported watches, and private schools. Otieno listened more than he spoke. Then one executive asked casually, "So, Otieno, what does your wife do?" He smiled proudly. "She works very hard." The executive laughed. "I didn't ask if she works hard." "What does she do?" Otieno hesitated. "She cleans offices." Silence lingered for a brief second. Then someone changed the subject. No one insulted him directly. No one needed to. For the first time in years, Otieno felt embarrassed speaking about the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. The feeling disturbed him. He tried to ignore it, but it returned again and again. Weeks later, the company organized a charity gala attended by business leaders from across East Africa. Employees were encouraged to bring their spouses. Achieng spent hours preparing. She carefully ironed her best navy blue dress. It was several years old. She polished her modest shoes until they looked almost new. Unable to afford a salon, she braided her own hair before placing small silver earrings in her ears. When she stepped into the living room, she smiled nervously. "Do I look all right?" Otieno forced a smile. "You look fine." "Fine, not beautiful, not wonderful, just fine." During the gala, Achieng remained kind and respectful to everyone she met. She thanked waiters. She greeted security guards. She even helped an elderly guest who accidentally dropped her handbag. Several people appreciated her warmth. Others noticed only her simple clothing. Among them was Zurinjeri, elegant, confident, sophisticated. She managed international partnerships for the company and came from one of Nairobi's wealthiest families. She noticed the difference between Achieng and everyone else immediately. Later that evening, she approached Otieno while Achieng spoke with another guest. "I didn't realize your wife was so traditional." Otieno forced another smile. "We've been through difficult times, I'm sure." Zuri sipped her wine. "Success changes people." "What do you mean?" "I simply mean some people grow into the life they're building." Her words seemed harmless, yet they remained inside Otieno's thoughts long after the conversation ended. From then on, Zuri often found reasons to work with him. She praised his intelligence. She encouraged his ambitions. She introduced him to influential clients. "You belong in executive leadership," she often said. "You shouldn't think like someone who's still struggling." At first, Otieno believed she simply wanted to help his career. Gradually, her compliments became personal. "So much potential, so much class. You deserve to move among people who understand your future." Each sentence subtly distanced him from his past. Meanwhile, Achieng noticed small changes at home. Otieno stayed later at the office. He answered work calls during dinner. Weekends disappeared beneath meetings and networking events. When she suggested visiting Kisumu to see their families, he sighed. "I don't have time." "You haven't visited your mother in nearly a year." "I'm building our future." She nodded quietly. "I know." But something inside her heart whispered that his future no longer looked like theirs. One Saturday morning, she surprised him with breakfast. "I have wonderful news." He barely looked up from his laptop. "What is it?" "I've been accepted into a small bookkeeping course." Finally, he raised his head. "Bookkeeping?" "Yes. If I learn accounting, maybe someday I can work in an office too." Instead of celebrating, Otieno frowned. "Do you really think that's realistic?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "You've spent years cleaning buildings. So, corporate employers want polished people." Her smile slowly disappeared. "I can learn. It's not that simple." The words cut deeper than he realized. For years, Achieng had believed he admired her determination. Now she wondered whether he saw only her limitations. Still, she refused to give up. She completed the course with excellent results. She proudly showed him her certificate. He congratulated her politely before returning to another business presentation. The excitement she hoped to share vanished within seconds. Months passed. Otieno received one promotion, then another. His salary tripled. The couple finally moved into a comfortable apartment. They could now afford proper furniture, reliable electricity, and enough food for every meal. Yet strangely, their home felt colder than the tiny room they had once shared. Money solved practical problems. It did not solve emotional distance. One evening, Achieng prepared Otieno's favorite meal to celebrate his latest promotion. Candles decorated the dining table. She had even baked a small homemade cake. He arrived nearly 2 hours late. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I already ate." "You ate?" "It was a business dinner." She looked at the untouched meal. "I wanted us to celebrate together." "I'm exhausted." He walked toward the bedroom. She stood alone beside the cooling food. That night, For the first time since their marriage, Achieng cried without letting him see. The following weeks became even harder. Otieno started criticizing things he had never noticed before. You should buy more professional clothes. You need to speak better English. Don't tell people you used to sell vegetables. That sounds unsophisticated. Each comment seemed small. Together they slowly erased the woman he had once loved. Then came the evening that changed everything. Achieng accidentally overheard two of Otieno's colleagues speaking outside the company's parking garage while she waited to surprise him after work. I heard management thinks Otieno has executive potential. He does. The only thing holding him back is his wife. I know. Someone said she used to clean offices. That won't look good at corporate events. Neither colleague realized Achieng was standing nearby. She quietly turned around and walked away before Otieno ever knew she had come. For the first time, she understood the invisible pressure surrounding her husband. She also realized something far more frightening. Instead of defending her, he had started believing them. And somewhere deep inside his heart, the man who once thanked her for every sacrifice was slowly disappearing. The months that followed became the hardest Achieng had ever lived through. She tried everything she could think of to save her marriage. She bought books about communication from a second-hand street vendor. She prayed every morning before Otieno woke up. She prepared his favorite meals whenever she could afford the ingredients. She even enrolled in free online English classes at the public library because she remembered his comment about sounding more professional. She never complained. She never accused him. She simply believed that love deserved one more chance. Otieno, however, seemed to be drifting farther away with every passing week. One Friday evening, he came home carrying an expensive suit bag. Achieng smiled. Another promotion. You could say that. I'm proud of you. He nodded absent-mindedly while hanging the suit inside the wardrobe. She noticed the label. It was from one of Nairobi's most luxurious boutiques. The price tag had not been removed. The suit cost nearly what she used to earn in 4 months. She forced herself to smile. You finally bought something nice for yourself. I have to. What do you mean? The people I work with notice these things. She remained silent. He continued. Appearance matters. She glanced down at her own simple blouse. I understand. But she wasn't sure she did. A few days later, the company hosted another executive dinner. This time, Otieno didn't even mention it until he was putting on his jacket. Aren't we leaving U? Achieng asked. I thought spouses were invited. He avoided her eyes. They changed the guest list. Only employees. Yes. She believed him. Later that night, while watching television alone, she saw a business report covering the very same dinner. Couples filled the ballroom. Every executive had arrived with a spouse. Every executive except Otieno. The camera briefly showed him laughing beside Zuri and Jerry. Their conversation looked effortless, comfortable, too comfortable. Achieng quietly switched off the television. When Otieno returned after midnight, she pretended to be asleep. She wasn't ready to ask questions whose answers might destroy what little hope remained. The truth arrived on its own. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Achieng decided to surprise Otieno with lunch. She carried a homemade meal inside a small insulated bag and took a bus across the city to Kayongozi capital. The receptionist smiled politely. Good afternoon. How may I help you? I'm here to see my husband, Otieno Odiambo. The receptionist checked her computer. I'm sorry, they're in a meeting. I can wait. Of course. Achieng sat quietly in the elegant lobby. Nearly 40 minutes passed. Then the elevator doors opened. Otieno stepped out. Beside him walked Zuri. Both were laughing. Without thinking, Zuri gently straightened Otieno's tie before brushing invisible dust from his shoulder. The gesture lasted only seconds, but it was intimate enough to stop Achieng's breathing. Otieno looked up. Their eyes met. His smile disappeared instantly. "Achieng!" She stood slowly. "I brought you lunch." He looked around nervously. Several coworkers had noticed. "You should have called first." "I wanted to surprise you." "You can't just come here." I'm sorry." Zuri stepped forward gracefully. "You must be Achieng." She extended her hand. "I've heard so much about you." Achieng accepted the handshake politely. "It's nice to meet you. Otieno speaks very highly of your sacrifices." The words sounded kind, yet somehow they felt like pity. Otieno quickly took the lunch bag. "Thank you. I should go." "Achieng, it's all right." She smiled gently before walking toward the exit. Only after boarding the crowded bus did the tears finally come. She wasn't crying because of another woman. She was crying because her husband had looked embarrassed to see her. That pain reached deeper than jealousy ever could. That evening, Otieno returned unusually early. "We need to talk." She nodded. "I know." He took a long breath. "I've been thinking about our future." "So have I. I don't think we're moving in the same direction anymore." Silence filled the apartment. "What are you saying?" "I've changed. People change. I don't think this marriage works anymore." She stared at him. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, "Is there someone else?" "No." He answered too quickly. "I just want a different life. A different life. A life where I can keep growing. And I'm stopping you." He lowered his head. "We're different people now." Achieng's voice trembled. "We became different because I spent years helping you become the man you wanted to be." He remained silent. "I sold my father's necklace." Silence. "I worked 3 jobs." Silence. "I skipped meals so you could study." Still nothing. She stepped closer. "Tell me honestly, did you ever stop loving me?" He closed his eyes. "I don't know." Those 3 words shattered everything. Within weeks, the divorce papers arrived. There were no children to fight over, no property worth arguing about. Only memories. The legal process ended quietly. No dramatic courtroom, no shouting, just signatures. The judge wished them both well. Achieng walked out carrying a small box containing the few belongings she had taken from their apartment. She did not ask for money. She did not ask for compensation. She simply walked away with her dignity. The apartment she rented afterward was smaller than the one they had shared years earlier. 1 narrow bed, a tiny stove, a single window overlooking a noisy alley. Sometimes she wondered how life had managed to circle back to where it had started. Except now, she was completely alone. Finding work proved difficult. Many employers wanted younger applicants. Others preferred people with formal experience. Eventually, she found employment cleaning a neighborhood medical clinic during the evenings. During the day, she sold homemade mandazi and tea near a busy bus terminal. The income barely covered rent. Yet something remarkable happened. Despite everything she had lost, she refused to become bitter. One cold morning, an elderly woman collapsed near her tea stand. Without hesitation, Achieng left her business unattended. She helped the woman sit down. She bought bottled water with her own money. She called a motorcycle taxi to take the woman home. The elderly woman tried to pay. Achieng shook her head. "Please keep your money." "But you've lost customers." "They'll come back." The woman smiled through grateful tears. "May God reward your heart." Achieng simply smiled. I hope someone would do the same for my mother. Acts like this became almost ordinary. She often shared unsold bread with homeless children instead of throwing it away. She helped an injured street vendor organize scattered merchandise after a traffic accident. She regularly visited an elderly widower in her neighborhood, bringing him warm soup whenever she cooked. None of these people were wealthy. None could repay her. She expected nothing. One stormy evening, while packing up her tea stand after sunset, she noticed an older man collapse beside the roadside. Pedestrians hurried past. Some looked. None stopped. Rain poured heavily. Cars splashed muddy water across the pavement. Achieng dropped everything and ran. The elderly man struggled to breathe. His expensive coat was soaked. His face had turned pale. "Can you hear me?" He nodded weakly. Without thinking about the cost, Achieng hailed the nearest taxi. "I don't have much money," she told the driver, "but please help me get him to the nearest hospital." The driver hesitated. Then he saw the desperation in her eyes. Together, they lifted the unconscious stranger into the back seat. Throughout the journey, Achieng held the old man's trembling hand, speaking softly to keep him conscious. "Please don't give up. We're almost there. You'll be all right." She had no idea who he was. She never searched his pockets. She never asked whether he could reward her. She only saw another human being whose life might end if nobody cared. Neither Achieng nor the exhausted doctors realized that before sunrise, one phone call would send shockwaves through Kenya's business community. Because the elderly man lying unconscious in the emergency room was not an ordinary stranger. He was Mzee Daniel Mwangi, the beloved father of billionaire entrepreneur Jabari Mwangi. By sunrise, the private wing of Nairobi Central Hospital was surrounded by black SUVs, uniformed security officers, and anxious executives dressed in expensive suits. Doctors who had worked through the night suddenly found themselves answering questions from lawyers, family representatives, and government officials. The unconscious patient was not merely an elderly man. He was Mzee Daniel Mwangi, the 74-year-old father of billionaire entrepreneur Jabari Mwangi, founder of one of East Africa's largest investment and infrastructure groups. Within hours, news of his sudden collapse quietly spread among Kenya's business elite. Fortunately, the doctors delivered encouraging news. If he had arrived even 20 minutes later, the senior physician explained, the outcome could have been very different. Jabari listened without interrupting. He had spent the entire night sitting outside his father's room, still wearing yesterday's dark blue suit. He looked calm. Inside, however, he was overwhelmed. His father had always seemed invincible. The thought of losing him left a fear he had never experienced before. "Who brought him here?" Jabari finally asked. The doctor glanced through several documents. "A woman." "Who is she?" "We don't know." "You don't know?" "She left before completing any paperwork." Jabari frowned. "She didn't leave her name." The nurse shook her head. "She only told us to save him first." Another nurse added quietly, "She even paid for the taxi that brought him here." Jabari stared toward the hospital window. Someone had rescued his father during a heavy storm, paid the transportation herself, and disappeared without asking for recognition. That was almost impossible to believe. "Find her." His assistant nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." "No matter how long it takes." Meanwhile, across the city, Achieng had already returned to her ordinary life. She woke before dawn, prepared dough for mandazi boiled tea, and pushed her small cart toward the busy bus terminal. She never imagined that somewhere else in Nairobi, one of the country's most powerful men was searching for her. Her neighbors knew nothing about the hospital. To them, Achieng remained the quiet, divorced woman who always smiled despite carrying invisible pain. One afternoon, her elderly neighbor, Mama Atieno, stopped by her tiny apartment, carrying a bowl of fresh maize. "You work too hard, my daughter." Achieng smiled. "We all have to work." Mama Atieno looked around the modest room. "You never complain. What would complaining change?" The old woman gently touched Achieng's hand. "You're still praying for your former husband, aren't you?" Achieng hesitated. "I pray that God changes my heart." "So you still love him?" She looked toward the window. "I don't know if it's love anymore." "What is it then?" "I just don't want to hate him." Mama Atieno nodded slowly. "That is much harder." Achieng smiled sadly. "It is." Several kilometers away, Otieno's life looked completely different. His promotion had finally placed him among senior management. He now drove a company vehicle. He wore tailored suits every day. People addressed him with admiration. Yet, the more successful he became, the more obsessed he grew with appearances. One evening, he accompanied Zuri to an exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooking Nairobi's skyline. She admired the city lights. "You've come a long way." "I have, and soon you'll become regional director." "That's the goal." She smiled. "My parents already like you." Otieno looked surprised. "They've never even met me." "They know your career." "And they believe you're ambitious." He smiled proudly. "That's a compliment." "It is." She paused. "They also think your divorce was necessary." For a brief second, guilt crossed his face. Then it disappeared. "We simply wanted different lives." "Exactly." Zuri reached for his hand. "Some people belong in your past." He didn't answer, but he didn't pull his hand away either. A month later, their engagement became official. The announcement spread quickly through business circles. Industry magazines published photographs of the elegant couple. Social media praised them as one of Nairobi's rising power couples. Friends congratulated Otieno. Executives welcomed him even more warmly. Only one person was never mentioned: Achieng. It was as though she had never existed. One afternoon, while discussing wedding preparations inside a luxury hotel, Zuri casually asked, "Will your ex-wife be there?" Otieno laughed. "Why would she come? You should invite her." He looked confused. "Seriously, it would show everyone there's no bitterness." The wedding planner nodded enthusiastically. "Very mature." Zuri smiled knowingly. "And she'll see exactly what she lost." Those words lingered in Otieno's mind, not because they were cruel, because they appealed directly to his pride. Over the following days, the idea transformed. It was no longer about maturity. It became something else: validation. He wanted Achieng to witness the life he had built. He wanted her to see the luxury hotel, the influential guests, the elegant bride, the success she supposedly could never have given him. Deep inside, he also wanted to prove to himself that leaving her had been the right decision. One evening, he opened an old storage box while searching for forgotten documents. Inside lay faded photographs from their early marriage. There was one picture of them standing beside Lake Victoria after their wedding. Both were laughing. Neither owned expensive clothes. Neither looked unhappy. He stared at the photograph for several moments. Then he quietly placed it back into the box. His phone rang. It was Zuri. "Have you chosen the guest list?" "Almost." "What about your ex-wife?" Otieno looked again at the box, then closed it. "Yes. I'll invite her." Across town, Achieng spent the evening helping neighborhood children with school homework inside a small community center. Education had always mattered to her. Even after exhausting workdays, she volunteered twice each week. One little girl looked up from her exercise book. "Teacher Achieng." "I'm not a teacher." "You teach us." She smiled. "What is it? When I grow up, I want to be kind like you. Achieng laughed softly. Be kinder. The child frowned. Is that possible? I hope so. At that exact moment, a luxury courier service stopped outside her apartment building. The driver stepped carefully around puddles before knocking on her door. Miss Achieng Atieno. Yes. I have a delivery requiring your signature. She accepted the elegant cream-colored envelope. Heavy paper, gold lettering, luxury embossing, the kind of invitation she had only seen in magazines. Her hands suddenly felt cold. She already knew. Without opening it, she knew exactly who had sent it. After the courier left, she stood alone in the small room for several minutes before slowly breaking the seal. Inside rested a beautifully printed wedding invitation. Mr. Otieno Odiambo and Miss Zureen Jerry request the honor of your presence as they celebrate their marriage. Folded beneath it was a handwritten note, only one sentence. I hope you'll come and see how far I've come. Achieng read the words again. And again. There was no apology, no gratitude, no kindness, only pride. Tears quietly filled her eyes, not because Otieno was marrying someone else, but because she finally understood why he wanted her there. He didn't want to share his happiness. He wanted her to witness what he believed was her failure. She folded the invitation carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. For the first time since the divorce, she genuinely did not know what to do. For 3 days, the elegant cream-colored envelope remained untouched on Achieng's small wooden table. Every morning before leaving for work, she looked at it. Every evening after returning home, she looked at it again. She never opened it a second time. She already knew every word inside. The handwritten note hurt far more than the invitation itself. I hope you'll come and see how far I've come. It wasn't an invitation. It was a reminder. A reminder that the man she had once loved believed success could only be measured by wealth. On the 4th evening, her closest friend Naliaka Wekesa visited after finishing her shift at a neighborhood pharmacy. The two women had met nearly a year earlier when Achieng had helped care for Naliaka's sick mother without expecting anything in return. Since then, they had become like sisters. Naliaka immediately noticed the unopened envelope. What's that? Achieng hesitated before handing it over. Naliaka read the invitation. Her face darkened. He actually sent this. Achieng nodded. And this note. She read the handwritten sentence twice before looking up. This isn't kindness. No. It's cruelty. Achieng quietly poured tea into 2 chipped cups. I know. Naliaka placed the invitation on the table. Promise me you won't go. I haven't decided. There is nothing to decide. Achieng remained silent. He wants people to laugh at you. I know. He wants to prove he made the right choice. I know. So why are you even thinking about it? Achieng stared into her tea. Because if I don't go, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering whether I stayed away because I was afraid. Naliaka sighed. You've never been afraid. No. You've always been too brave for your own good. A faint smile crossed Achieng's face. Maybe. But courage isn't the same as walking into humiliation. The conversation ended without an answer. That night, Achieng barely slept. She kept remembering the young man who had once carried her vegetable baskets through the rain. The man who used to tell her they would conquer the world together. She wondered where that version of Otieno had gone. Or perhaps, he had never truly existed. Meanwhile, at Nairobi Central Hospital, Mimsy Daniel Mwangi had recovered enough to leave intensive care. His strength returned slowly, but his memory of the storm remained vivid. He remembered collapsing beside the road. He remembered people walking past him, and he remembered one gentle voice refusing to leave. Every morning he asked the same question. "Have you found her?" Jabari shook his head. "Not yet." His father smiled weakly. "Then keep looking." "We are." "You know why." Jabari nodded. His father wasn't interested in rewarding the woman with money. He simply wanted to thank her. "There are still people with beautiful hearts," the old man whispered. "They're becoming rare." Jabari looked thoughtfully through the hospital window. "I'll find her." He meant every word. Back at Mwangi Holdings headquarters, Jabari assigned 3 trusted employees to investigate. Unlike a police search, this one relied on compassion rather than suspicion. They visited taxi companies, nearby shops, street vendors, the emergency department. They interviewed security guards who had worked during the storm. Most people remembered only fragments. There was a woman, simple clothes, very calm. She stayed until the doctors took over. "No, I don't know her name." Days turned into weeks. The search continued. Across the city, life remained ordinary for Achieng. She continued selling tea before sunrise. She continued cleaning the medical clinic every evening. She continued volunteering at the community center twice each week. Nothing in her daily routine suggested destiny was quietly approaching. One Saturday afternoon, heavy rain forced dozens of pedestrians beneath the same bus shelter. Among them stood a young pregnant woman balancing 2 shopping bags. Suddenly, one of the bags split open. Groceries rolled across the wet pavement. Several people looked. Nobody moved. Without hesitation, Achieng knelt on the soaked ground, collecting scattered vegetables and baby supplies before passing them back. The pregnant woman smiled gratefully. "Thank you. It's all right. You've ruined your clothes. They'll dry." An elderly security guard watching nearby quietly shook his head. "I've seen you help strangers 3 times this month." Achieng laughed softly. "I've probably needed help 300 times. He smiled. "Then the world owes you something." She gently replied, "Kindness isn't alone." The old guard never forgot those words. 3 days later, he repeated them to one of Jabari's investigators while describing the mysterious woman from the hospital. That single sentence changed everything. Kindness isn't alone. The investigator stopped writing. "What did you say?" "That's exactly what she told me." "Do you know where she works?" "I've seen her selling tea near River Road." Within an hour, the information reached Jabari. The following morning before sunrise, a black SUV parked discreetly across from Achieng's tea cart. Jabari remained inside. He didn't want to interrupt her. He simply wanted to see the woman his father had spoken about with such admiration. From behind the tinted windows, he watched quietly. Achieng greeted every customer with the same warm smile. When a schoolboy realized he had forgotten his money, she handed him tea anyway. "Bring it tomorrow." "I will." "You don't have to hurry." A few minutes later, an elderly man searching his pockets looked embarrassed. "I seem to be short." "Then today's breakfast is my treat." "I can't accept that." "You already have." He laughed. "You'll go out of business." "Hopefully not today." Jabari observed everything. There was no performance, no cameras, no audience. This was simply who she was. Then something happened that affected him more deeply than he expected. A barefoot street child wandered toward the cart. The boy stared at the fresh mandazi, but said nothing. Achieng noticed immediately. "Hungry?" The boy nodded. Without asking questions, she wrapped 2 warm mandazi in paper and poured him a cup of tea. "I don't have money." "I didn't ask." He smiled shyly before running away. Jabari remained silent for a long moment. His driver finally spoke. "Sir," Jabari answered quietly, "my father was right." "What should we do?" "Nothing." The driver looked confused. "Nothing. Not yet." He continued watching Achieng. "If she's helping people because she's kind—" He paused. "Then I don't want her first memory of me to be a billionaire arriving with cameras and gratitude. So I'll meet her as an ordinary man." The driver nodded. "I understand." That afternoon, wearing simple clothes without bodyguards or expensive watches, Jabari returned alone. He approached the tea cart like any other customer. "1 cup of tea, please." Achieng smiled warmly. "Of course." As she handed him the steaming cup, neither of them realized that this ordinary conversation would become the beginning of a relationship that would change both of their lives forever. The first thing Jabari noticed was not Achieng's appearance. It was her eyes. They carried a quiet calm that was difficult to explain. They were the eyes of someone who had suffered deeply without allowing pain to harden her heart. He accepted the cup of tea with a grateful smile. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Achieng replied warmly. "You must wake up very early." She laughed softly. If I don't, my customers will find breakfast somewhere else." Jabari smiled. "Business sounds competitive." "It is. But people are loyal if you treat them well." He took a sip. The tea was simple. Fresh ginger, milk, just enough sugar. It reminded him of the tea his late mother used to prepare before he left for school as a boy. "It's excellent." "That's kind of you." "It isn't kindness. It's the truth." For the first time in a long while, Achieng laughed freely. It was a genuine laugh, not one forced to hide sadness. Jabari found himself smiling with her. From that morning onward, he returned several times each week, never in luxury vehicles, never accompanied by security. He parked several streets away and walked the remaining distance. To everyone around them, he appeared to be nothing more than another professional stopping for breakfast before work. They spoke about ordinary things: the unpredictable Nairobi weather, the rising cost of food, traffic, books, children laughing on their way to school. Neither discussed wealth, neither discussed success, neither mentioned the hospital. Jabari wanted to understand who Achieng truly was before revealing anything. One morning he asked casually, "Do you ever take a day off?" She smiled. "My rent doesn't." He chuckled. "Fair answer." "And you?" "I work too much." "What do you do?" "I manage a family business." "What kind?" "Construction." That answer wasn't entirely false. It simply wasn't complete. She nodded. "It must be stressful." "It can be." "You should rest sometimes." "I probably should." As weeks passed, Jabari began adjusting his own schedule so he could spend more time near her tea stand. His assistant Miriam eventually noticed. "You've canceled 3 executive breakfasts this month." "I have." "You never cancel executive breakfasts." He smiled faintly. "I've discovered better tea." She raised an eyebrow. "Tea and better company." Miriam had worked with Jabari for almost 10 years. She recognized that expression immediately. "You've met someone." He didn't answer. His silence answered enough. Meanwhile, Achieng still had no idea who he truly was. She only knew he was thoughtful, respectful, and surprisingly easy to talk to. Unlike many customers, he listened more than he spoke. He remembered small details. If she once mentioned her favorite author, he asked about the next book she was reading. If she mentioned Mama Atieno's aching knees, he later asked whether the elderly woman was feeling better. Those little things mattered. One rainy afternoon, business was unusually slow. Jabari helped her fold chairs and move supplies away from the wind. You don't have to help, she said. I know. So why are you? Because you're doing it alone. She looked at him curiously. Most people only help when they have something to gain. He shrugged. Perhaps they're missing something. She smiled. Perhaps. A few days later, Jabari visited his father, who had finally returned home from the hospital. MZ Daniel was sitting on the veranda overlooking the garden. You found her. Jabari looked surprised. How did you know? The old man laughed quietly. You're smiling. I don't smile. Not like this. Jabari sat beside him. She's exactly as you described. Kind. More than that. Humble. Even more. His father watched birds gathering near the garden fountain. Does she know? No. When will you tell her? I'm not sure. MZ Daniel became thoughtful. If she discovers your wealth before she discovers your character. He paused. She may never know which one attracted you. Jabari nodded. I've thought about that. Then don't rush. Several days later, an opportunity arrived unexpectedly. Achieng mentioned she had completed a bookkeeping course after her divorce. I never found office work, she admitted. Most companies wanted experience. Jabari became interested. You studied bookkeeping, only basic accounting. Did you enjoy it? Very much. So, why stop? She smiled sadly. Life became expensive. That conversation stayed with him. The following morning he called Miriam. I need a favor. What kind? Our community education foundation needs another finance assistant. It does. It will. She smiled knowingly. I understand. But there's one condition. What is it? She must earn the position honestly. So, no special treatment. None. If she's qualified, she gets the job. If she isn't, she doesn't. A week later, Achieng noticed a notice posted at the community center. Finance assistant needed. The position belonged to the Mwanga Community Foundation, a respected nonprofit organization supporting education and healthcare projects across Kenya. She hesitated. I don't have enough experience. Naliaka disagreed immediately. You've studied bookkeeping. A little. You've managed your own business. A tea cart isn't exactly corporate finance. It proves responsibility. Achieng laughed. You always believe in me. Because someone once believed in you. Those words reminded Achieng of her younger self, encouraging Otieno years ago. For a brief moment, old memories returned. Then they quietly faded. She submitted her application. 3 days later, she received an interview invitation. She wore the same navy blue dress she had once prepared for Otieno's company gala. This time, she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply wanted to look respectful. The interview panel consisted of 3 managers. None recognized her from the hospital. None knew Jabari had quietly suggested the vacancy. The questions were practical. Budget records, receipts, basic accounting, ethics, teamwork. When one interviewer asked how she would handle discovering financial misconduct, she answered without hesitation. I would report the truth, even if reporting it cost you your job. She looked directly at him. If I protect dishonesty, I lose something much more valuable than a salary. The panel exchanged quiet glances. Another interviewer asked, Tell us about your greatest strength. She thought carefully. I don't give up easily. And your greatest weakness? She smiled modestly. I trust people too quickly. The room became silent. There was something refreshing about her honesty. Outside the building, Jabari waited inside his car, pretending to review documents. In reality, he simply wanted to know how the interview had gone. When Achieng walked out, She looked calm, not confident, not discouraged, simply peaceful. He approached her casually. "How did it go?" She smiled. "I honestly don't know." "You seem relaxed." I answered truthfully. "And if that's enough, I'll get the job. If not, then another opportunity will come." Jabari admired that answer. Most people measured success by outcomes. Achieng measured success by integrity. 4 days later, her phone rang while she was serving morning tea. "Good morning. May I speak with Miss Achieng Atieno?" Speaking. "This is the Mwanga Community Foundation." Her heart skipped. "We're pleased to offer you the finance assistant position." For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Finally, she whispered, Are you sure? Are you sure?" The woman laughed warmly. "We've checked twice." Tears filled Achieng's eyes. "Thank you. We look forward to working with you." She slowly lowered the phone. Customers nearby noticed her expression. "Good news." She nodded. "I got the job." Everyone applauded. Even strangers smiled. Standing quietly across the street with a cup of tea in his hands, Jabari watched her celebrate. He felt happier than if he had closed the biggest business deal of his career. Because for the first time in many years, Achieng's smile was no longer hiding pain. It was filled with genuine hope. And without realizing it, both of their lives had just begun moving toward a future neither of them had ever expected. Starting her new job at the Mwanga Community Foundation felt like stepping into a completely different life. On her first morning, Achieng stood outside the modern office building nearly 15 minutes early. Instead of rushing inside, she paused for a moment, looking up at the glass entrance reflecting the bright Nairobi sky. Only a year earlier, she had believed she would spend the rest of her life cleaning offices at night and selling tea before sunrise. Now she was walking into one. She closed her eyes briefly. "Thank you," she whispered. Not for the promotion, not for the salary, but for giving her another chance. Inside, she was welcomed by Miriam, the foundation's operations director. "Good morning, Achieng." "Good morning." "Nervous?" "A little." "That's a good sign." "It is. It means you care." Miriam smiled kindly before introducing her to the rest of the finance department. Unlike the competitive corporate environment Otieno had once described, the atmosphere inside the foundation felt surprisingly warm. People greeted each other by name. Senior staff shared lunch tables with interns. No one seemed interested in showing off expensive watches or designer clothing. The foundation existed to support schools, health clinics, and small community businesses across Kenya. Every shilling had a purpose. That purpose inspired everyone who worked there. Within only a few weeks, Achieng gained a reputation for something that couldn't be taught: integrity. One afternoon, while reviewing supplier invoices, she noticed that one contractor had accidentally been paid twice. The duplicate payment amounted to several thousand shillings. No one else had seen the mistake. She immediately reported it. Her supervisor looked surprised. "Most people would never have noticed." She smiled. "I noticed." "You realize this would probably have remained hidden. Then it's even more important to correct it." The supervisor nodded with quiet admiration. Later that afternoon, Miriam mentioned the incident during a management meeting. "She's remarkably honest." Jabari listened without interrupting. He wasn't surprised. "Anything else?" he asked. "Employees already trust her." "So quickly, people trust people who never pretend." Jabari smiled to himself. That described Achieng perfectly. Although he owned the foundation, he still avoided meeting her inside the office. He wanted her professional achievements to belong entirely to her. If colleagues learned she had any connection to him, they might question whether she deserved her position. He refused to let that happen. Instead, they continued meeting naturally outside work, sometimes at her tea cart after she finished her office shift, sometimes during quiet walks through Uhuru Park, sometimes at a modest cafe where nobody recognized him. Their conversations gradually became more personal. One evening, while watching children play football in the park, Jabari asked softly, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you ever regretted being kind?" She thought for a long moment. "There were days when I wondered if kindness only attracts pain. And now, I've realized something." "What?" "Kindness doesn't always change the person receiving it." She looked toward the children laughing nearby. "But it protects the person giving it." Jabari remained silent. Those words stayed with him long after they left the park. He had spent years building companies, negotiating contracts, and making difficult business decisions. Yet this woman explained wisdom more clearly than many executives he had met. As the months passed, Achieng flourished. She mastered financial software. She organized community grant records. She even suggested a more efficient system for tracking scholarship payments to rural schools. The proposal reduced administrative delays by almost 30%. Her manager praised her during a staff meeting. "This idea will help hundreds of students receive support faster." The room applauded. Achieng blushed with embarrassment. "I only noticed a small problem." "That's exactly why good organizations improve," her manager replied. "They're built by people who notice small problems before they become large ones." That evening, Jabari happened to meet Miriam in the office corridor. "I heard today's meeting went well." She smiled knowingly. "You already know why." "I might." Achieng impressed everyone. "I'm glad." Miriam folded her arms. "May I ask you something personal?" "You usually do." "When are you planning to tell her who you really are?" Jabari sighed. "I ask myself that every day. And I still don't know." Miriam studied him carefully. "You're afraid." "I've negotiated billion-dollar agreements without fear." "But this is different." He nodded. "Yes." "What if she thinks I've been testing her?" "You haven't." "What if she believes I lied?" "You did." Jabari smiled awkwardly. "I suppose I did." Miriam softened her voice. "Then tell her before someone else does." Those words echoed in his mind. Meanwhile, preparations for Otieno and Zuri's wedding accelerated. Luxury magazines featured photographs of the venue. The guest list expanded to include prominent politicians, international investors, celebrities, and business leaders. Everything had to appear perfect. During one planning meeting, Zuri admired the ballroom decorations. "This wedding will be unforgettable." Otieno smiled proudly. "It should be." She glanced through the final guest list. "I noticed your ex-wife hasn't responded." "She still has time." "You really think she'll come?" "I know she will." "How?" Curiosity. He leaned back confidently. "People always want to see the life they lost." Zuri smiled. "If she doesn't," Otieno shrugged, "then she'll spend years wondering." Deep inside, however, another emotion hid beneath his confidence. He wanted Achieng to see him, not simply to witness his success. He wanted confirmation. Confirmation that leaving her had been worth the cost. Without realizing it, he still depended on her opinion far more than he admitted. Across town, Achieng had almost forgotten about the invitation. Work kept her busy. Volunteering filled her evenings. Her friendship with Jabari brought unexpected peace into her life. One Saturday afternoon, they visited a children's literacy program sponsored by the foundation. The children immediately surrounded Achieng. "Teacher, Read us another story." She laughed as they pulled her toward a colorful reading corner. Jabari stood quietly nearby, watching. An elderly volunteer approached him. "Your wife is wonderful." He smiled politely. "We're not married." The volunteer looked genuinely surprised. "I assumed." "So did I." "What?" He laughed softly. "Nothing." As he watched Achieng patiently reading aloud to excited children, he realized something that both frightened and comforted him. He was in love, not because she had saved his father, not because she was admired at the foundation, not because she was beautiful, though she certainly was. He loved the woman who believed every child deserved another story before going home. The woman who remembered everyone's birthday. The woman who still shared food with strangers despite knowing what hunger felt like. That evening, after driving home, Jabari sat alone in his study for nearly an hour. Finally, he opened a small wooden box that had belonged to his late mother. Inside rested a simple diamond engagement ring she had once worn every day. He held it gently. His mother had often told him, "The greatest wealth you will ever find is someone whose heart remains kind after life has given them every reason to become cruel." For years he had believed those words were beautiful. Now he understood them. The next morning he visited his father. Without saying a word, he placed the ring box on the table. Mzee Daniel looked at it, then looked at his son. "You've decided?" Jabari smiled. "I have." His father opened the box slowly. Then he looked back at Jabari with tears gathering in his eyes. "Does she know?" "Not yet." "When will you ask her?" Jabari looked out across the garden where the morning sunlight touched the flowers. "Soon. Very soon." He had made his decision. What he didn't know was that destiny had already chosen the perfect moment. It would happen just days before the wedding invitation demanded its final answer. The wedding invitation remained tucked inside the top drawer of Achieng's bedside table. She had not forgotten about it. She had simply refused to let it control her life. Whenever the memory of Otieno's handwritten note resurfaced, she reminded herself that the past no longer had the power to decide her future. Work at the Mwanga Community Foundation became increasingly busy as several new education projects were launched across Western Kenya. Achieng traveled with small teams to rural schools, helping local administrators organize grants and account for donated supplies. She loved every assignment. For the first time in years, she returned home each evening, feeling that her work had truly mattered. One Friday afternoon, while reviewing scholarship applications, she received an unexpected phone call. It was her mother. "Achieng." "Hello, Mama. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Never." There was a brief silence. "I heard something." Achieng smiled gently. "What did you hear?" "Someone from Kisumu told me your former husband is getting married." Achieng looked toward the office window. "Yes." "Is it true?" "It is." Another silence followed. "My daughter, I'm all right." "You don't sound angry." "I was. And now, I'm simply tired." Her mother sighed. "I prayed every day that he would remember the woman who carried him through poverty." "So did I. But people choose their own hearts." Achieng nodded, although her mother could not see her. "They do." Her mother hesitated before asking the question she had carried for days. "Will you attend?" "I don't know." "Then don't answer today." "Why?" "Because decisions made from old pain usually become new regrets." Those words remained with Achieng long after the call ended. That evening, Jabari invited her to dinner at a quiet, family-owned restaurant overlooking Karura Forest. Unlike the luxurious places favored by business elites, this restaurant was simple and peaceful. Birdsong drifted through the open windows. Soft instrumental music filled the room. The owner greeted regular customers by name. "I've never been here before," Achieng said. "It's one of my favorite places." "I can see why." After dinner, they walked slowly through the nearby gardens. The cool evening breeze carried the scent of fresh rain. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Jabari broke the silence. "May I ask you something important?" She smiled. "You've already asked several important questions. This one is different." She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" He stopped walking. "So much of your life has been spent helping other people." She nodded. "I've noticed." "When was the last time someone truly took care of you?" She looked away. "I don't remember." "I was afraid you'd say that." Her voice softened. "I've been all right." "No." He shook his head gently. "You've survived." "There's a difference." She didn't answer, because she knew he was right. Over the past year, she had learned to stand on her own. She had learned to rebuild, to forgive, to work hard, but allowing someone else to care for her again, that still frightened her. Jabari reached into his coat pocket. A small wooden box rested in his hand. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, he looked directly into her eyes. "When we first met, I admired your kindness." She smiled faintly. "I was selling tea." "I know." "Then I admired your courage." He continued. "I watched you start over without bitterness." "I simply did what I had to do." "No. You chose grace." He paused. "I've spent years meeting successful people. Very few impressed me." "You do." Achieng felt her heartbeat quicken. "You barely know me." "I know enough." He slowly opened the wooden box. Inside rested a simple, elegant diamond ring. Nothing extravagant, nothing designed to display wealth, just beautiful craftsmanship. Her eyes widened. "Jabari, I don't know what tomorrow brings. I only know what I've discovered." "What?" "I've discovered that peace follows wherever you are." His voice remained calm. "I love the woman who helps strangers. The woman who never stops believing people can change. The woman who worked 3 jobs to support the man she loved. The woman who still smiles after every reason not to." Tears filled Achieng's eyes. He continued quietly. "I don't want to rescue you. I don't think you need rescuing. I want to walk beside you." He took a slow breath. "Achieng Atieno." He knelt. "Would you honor me by becoming my wife?" For several seconds, she couldn't speak. The world around them seemed to disappear. Only one memory remained. Years earlier, another young man had once promised to build a future with her. That promise had ended in heartbreak. Jabari noticed the hesitation. He smiled gently. "You don't have to answer tonight." "I don't know. I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer." She laughed softly through her tears. "You always know what to say." "No, I just don't want fear making this decision." She looked at the ring again, then back at him. "My greatest fear," she whispered, "isn't loving again." "What is it?" "Trusting again." Jabari slowly stood. "I understand. And if your answer is no," he smiled, "I'll still be grateful that you came into my life." His words carried no pressure, no expectation, only respect. That was what finally broke the last wall around Achieng's heart. She stepped closer. "You really would stay." "I would. Even if I said no, yes." She looked into his eyes. For the first time since her divorce, she saw no pride, no ambition, no desire to possess, only sincerity. Tears rolled gently down her cheeks. "I've prayed for months. she whispered, asking God to heal the parts of me that stopped believing in love. Jabari remained silent. I think, she smiled through trembling lips. He already answered that prayer. She extended her left hand. Yes. A quiet smile spread across Jabari's face, not the triumphant smile of a businessman closing an important deal, the grateful smile of a man receiving an unexpected gift. He gently slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Neither noticed the elderly restaurant owner quietly wiping tears from his eyes while watching from the doorway. As they continued walking beneath the evening sky, Achieng suddenly remembered the invitation. I have to tell you something. What is it? My former husband invited me to his wedding. Jabari nodded slowly. I know. You do. The newspapers covered it. She sighed. I think he wants to humiliate me. I believe you're right. She looked at him. I was planning not to go. And now? She hesitated. I don't know. Jabari remained thoughtful. May I make a suggestion? Please. Don't decide because of him. She frowned slightly. What do you mean, if you stay away because you're afraid? He smiled gently. He still controls part of your life. She nodded slowly. And if you go only to prove something, he still controls your life. She laughed quietly. So what should I do? Go only if your heart is free. They walked in silence for another minute. Finally, Achieng smiled. My heart is becoming free. Jabari reached for her hand. Then perhaps, he looked ahead thoughtfully, we should attend together. Achieng stopped walking. She stared at him. For the first time she imagined entering that ballroom, not as the broken woman Otieno expected, but as someone who had finally found peace. She smiled. Yes. I think we should. Neither of them realized that their decision would soon become the moment every guest at Otieno's wedding would remember for the rest of their lives. The morning of Otieno Odiambo's wedding dawned bright and cloudless over Nairobi. From the earliest hours, the Grand Royal Hotel buzzed with activity. Florists arranged thousands of white roses along the marble staircase. Event coordinators hurried through the ballroom with clipboards in hand. Musicians rehearsed softly near the stage. Waiters polished crystal glasses until they sparkled beneath enormous chandeliers. Every detail reflected luxury. Every corner had been designed to impress. Outside the hotel, luxury vehicles began arriving one after another. Government officials, corporate executives, foreign investors, television personalities, influential families. Each guest stepped onto the red carpet while photographers captured every smile. Inside the groom's private suite, Otieno stood before a full-length mirror, adjusting his black tuxedo. His best man, Kevin Uma, straightened his bow tie. You look nervous. Otieno smiled confidently. Every groom is nervous. Kevin laughed. No, this is something else. Otieno glanced toward the window. The guest list is perfect. So why do you keep checking your phone? He hesitated. I'm waiting. For who? No one. Kevin had known Otieno for years. He recognized the lie immediately. You're waiting for Achieng. Otieno didn't answer. Kevin sighed. I still don't understand why you invited her. It closes the past. No. It reopens it. Otieno buttoned his jacket. I simply want her to see that everything worked out. Kevin looked directly at him. For you. Silence. The answer spoke for itself. Meanwhile, across the city, Achieng stood quietly in front of a bedroom mirror. Her apartment was no longer the tiny room she had rented after the divorce. Although still modest, it now felt warm and welcoming. Fresh flowers rested on the windowsill. Books filled a small shelf near the sofa. Photographs from community projects decorated one wall. For the first time in years, it truly felt like home. Naliaka adjusted the final pin in Achieng's hairstyle before stepping back. There. Achieng turned slowly toward the mirror. She wore an elegant emerald green evening gown. Its design was graceful rather than extravagant. Simple diamond earrings reflected the morning sunlight. Her engagement ring caught the light as she gently touched it. She hardly recognized the confident woman looking back at her. Naliaka smiled proudly. He's going to regret everything. Achieng immediately shook her head. I don't want that. I don't want today to be about revenge. Naliaka folded her arms. Then what do you want? Achieng thought carefully. I want today to prove something. What? That healing is possible. Her friend smiled. You're a better woman than I am. Achieng laughed softly. No, I've simply spent too much time carrying pain. Across town, Jabari prepared in his own residence. Unlike Otieno's suite, his morning was remarkably quiet. He chose a classic navy tuxedo instead of something flashy. His longtime driver entered the room. The vehicles are ready, sir. Thank you. Media outlets already know you'll be attending. I expected that. They're asking why. Jabari smiled faintly. They'll find out soon enough. Before leaving, he stopped in his father's room. Mimsy Daniel was reading near the window. You look handsome. Jabari laughed. I hope Achieng agrees. She already said yes. I know. His father stood slowly. I'm proud of you. Thank you. You chose character. I chose peace. The old man embraced his son. Those are usually the same thing. Back at the Grand Royal Hotel, guests continued filling the ballroom. Conversations centered around investment opportunities, politics, and business expansion. Many admired the luxurious decorations. Others quietly estimated how much the wedding must have cost. Zurin Jerry descended the grand staircase wearing an exquisite ivory wedding gown embroidered with delicate lace. The room applauded. She looked every bit the elegant bride. Her parents welcomed distinguished guests with practiced smiles. Everything appeared flawless. Yet Zuri noticed one thing. Otieno kept glancing toward the ballroom entrance. Again and again. Finally, she whispered, Who are you looking for? No one. She smiled knowingly. Your ex-wife. He forced a laugh. I was simply checking whether everyone arrived. Of course. She chose not to press further, but the thought remained. Why would a groom keep watching the entrance during his own wedding? Elsewhere in the ballroom, whispers slowly began spreading. I heard he invited his former wife. Really? Why? No idea. That's unusual. Some guests expected drama. Others dismissed the rumors. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. Still, there was no sign of Achieng. Kevin quietly approached Otieno. Maybe she isn't coming. Otieno checked his watch. She'll come. You sound certain. I know her. He believed she would never ignore a challenge. What he failed to realize was that he no longer knew the woman Achieng had become. Several kilometers away, a black luxury SUV waited outside Achieng's apartment. Jabari stepped out, personally, instead of sending a driver. When Achieng opened the door, he stopped speaking for a moment. She looked radiant, not because of the dress, because peace had transformed her expression. You look beautiful. She smiled shyly. So do you. Naliaka pretended to wipe away imaginary tears. If you two keep staring at each other, you'll miss the wedding. Everyone laughed. As the vehicle began moving toward the hotel, silence filled the back seat. Not uncomfortable silence. Thoughtful silence. After several minutes, Jabari gently reached for Achieng's hand. "Are you all right?" She nodded. "I think so. You can still change your mind." "No." She looked out the window. "For years, I believed seeing Otieno again would destroy me. And now, I don't feel broken." She smiled quietly. "I feel grateful." "What changed?" "I stopped asking why he left, and started asking what kind of woman I wanted to become after he left." Jabari squeezed her hand gently. "I already know the answer." She looked at him. "What is it?" "The kind of woman who saves strangers." They both smiled. The convoy continued through Nairobi traffic. At the hotel entrance, security personnel suddenly straightened their posture as they recognized the lead vehicle. The hotel manager hurried outside. Senior executives standing near the entrance exchanged surprised glances. "Is that—" "I think it is." "Why would he be here?" Within seconds, messages spread quietly throughout the ballroom. One influential guest whispered to another, "Jabari Mwangi has just arrived." Heads immediately turned toward the entrance. Inside the bridal suite, a hotel coordinator rushed toward Otieno. "Sir, what is it?" "We have an unexpected guest." Otieno frowned. "Who?" The coordinator hesitated. "Mr. Jabari Mwangi." Otieno's eyes widened. "The billionaire?" "Yes, sir." Confusion replaced confidence. Otieno had never invited Jabari. They had met only briefly at industry conferences. Why would one of Kenya's most respected businessmen attend his wedding? A thought crossed his mind. Perhaps Jabari had come because of Zuri's influential family. He straightened his jacket proudly. This would make the wedding even more prestigious. Outside, photographers rushed toward the arriving convoy. Camera flashes illuminated the entrance. The lead SUV came to a gentle stop. Security officers opened the first door. Jabari stepped onto the red carpet. Every executive near the entrance immediately recognized him. Some began walking toward him to offer greetings, but Jabari ignored every outstretched hand. Instead, he calmly turned back toward the vehicle. Then he extended his hand toward someone still seated inside. Every conversation stopped. Every camera shifted direction. Every eye focused on the open door. Slowly, gracefully, Achieng placed her hand in his and stepped onto the red carpet. For several long seconds, the entire entrance of the Grand Royal Hotel fell into complete silence. The clicking of cameras stopped. The conversations between politicians and business executives faded into nothing. Even the musicians inside the ballroom paused as curious guests turned toward the entrance. Standing beside Jabari, Mwangi Achieng looked calm. She wasn't trying to attract attention. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She simply stood with quiet confidence, her emerald green gown moving gently in the morning breeze. Jabari offered his arm. She accepted it naturally. Together they began walking toward the ballroom. The silence lasted only a moment before someone gasped, "That's Jabari Mwangi." Another guest whispered in disbelief, "He rarely attends public weddings." "What is he doing here? I heard he's been avoiding social events for months." One by one, influential guests hurried toward him. "Mr. Mwangi, it's an honor to see you. Congratulations on coming." Several executives who had ignored Otieno only minutes earlier now stood eagerly waiting for a chance to shake Jabari's hand. He greeted them politely, briefly, never allowing anyone to separate him from Achieng. Instead of introducing himself, he quietly introduced her. "This is Achieng." Nothing more. Yet his tone carried unmistakable respect. People immediately noticed. If Jabari Mwangi treated this woman with such dignity, she had to be someone important. Inside the ballroom, whispers spread like ripples across water. Who is she? I've never seen her before. She came with Jabari. Then she must be someone extraordinary. Across the room, Zuri noticed the growing crowd near the entrance. She frowned. What is happening? One bridesmaid looked toward the doors. I think a VIP just arrived. Zuri smiled confidently. Probably another investor. Then she noticed something strange. Guests weren't only greeting Jabari. Many were staring at the woman beside him. Confused expressions slowly replaced excitement. Meanwhile, Otieno stood frozen. At first he recognized only Jabari. His heart raced. Having someone of Jabari's reputation attend the wedding could elevate his own standing among Kenya's business elite. Then, he looked beside him. Time seemed to stop. His face slowly lost all color. Achieng. She looked nothing like the broken woman he had imagined. Her posture was elegant. Her smile was peaceful. There was no sadness in her eyes, no desperation, no trace of the pain he expected to see. Instead, she looked happier than he had ever remembered. Otieno blinked several times. He wondered if he was imagining it. How could the woman he had left behind walk into his wedding beside one of Africa's most respected billionaires? Kevin quietly stepped beside him. Otieno. He didn't respond. Otieno. What? Isn't that? Yes. Kevin stared toward the entrance. I don't understand. Neither do I. Across the ballroom, Achieng also saw Otieno for the first time in over a year. She expected old memories to return. She expected anger, perhaps sadness. Instead, she felt surprisingly calm. The man standing near the stage no longer looked like the young husband who once repaired broken radios in Kisumu. His expensive tuxedo fit perfectly. His confident posture remained. Yet something had disappeared. The warmth in his eyes. The quiet humility that had once made her fall in love. She whispered softly to herself, I hope you find peace someday. Jabari glanced toward her. Are you all right? She smiled. I truly am. He gently squeezed her hand. I believe you. Nearby, an elderly executive approached Jabari. Mr. Mwangi, it has been too long. It has. The executive turned toward Achieng. And your fiancé? Jabari smiled warmly. Yes. My fiancé. The word spread astonishingly fast. Fiancé. Within minutes, guests began exchanging surprised glances. The woman with Jabari is his fiancé. Really? When did that happen? No idea. Why haven't the newspapers reported it, or they've kept it private? Across the ballroom, several journalists immediately began making phone calls. Others quietly updated editors waiting outside. What had begun as society's wedding of the year was rapidly becoming something entirely different. Otieno struggled to understand what he was seeing. His mind searched desperately for explanations. Maybe Achieng worked for Jabari. Maybe she was simply accompanying him to the event. Maybe... But then he noticed the engagement ring on her finger. His breathing slowed. He looked again. The ring wasn't flashy. It wasn't oversized. Yet there was no mistaking what it represented. His ex-wife was engaged to Jabari Mwangi. Impossible. Zuri finally walked beside him. What are you staring at? He pointed quietly. She followed his gaze. For a brief second, even her confident smile disappeared. I know him. So do I. Why is he here? I don't know. She looked carefully at Achieng. Isn't that? Yes. Your ex-wife? Otieno nodded slowly. Neither spoke again. Elsewhere in the ballroom, Mama Atieno Achieng's elderly neighbor, whom Jabari had personally invited after learning how much she had supported Achieng during difficult times, watched quietly from a nearby table. Tears filled her eyes. She remembered the lonely woman who had moved into the neighborhood carrying only one suitcase. She remembered evenings when Achieng secretly skipped meals because rent was overdue. She remembered hearing muffled crying through the apartment wall after the divorce. Now, that same woman entered one of Nairobi's grandest ballrooms with quiet dignity. Not because she had chased wealth, because life had finally honored the kindness she had given so freely. Near the entrance, another familiar face quietly observed everything. It was the elderly security guard from the bus shelter, the man who still remembered Achieng, saying, "Kindness isn't alone." He smiled proudly. She was right. Eventually, the master of ceremonies approached Jabari respectfully. "Mr. Mwangi." "Yes." "We're honored by your presence." "Thank you. May we escort you and your fiancé to the reserved front table?" Jabari nodded politely. As they walked toward the front of the ballroom, something remarkable happened. Guests instinctively stepped aside, not because security instructed them, because respect did. A clear path opened before Achieng. Many of the same executives who would never have noticed her a year earlier now greeted her warmly. "It is wonderful to meet you. Congratulations. We've heard so much about the Foundation's community work." Achieng answered every greeting with humility. "Thank you. It's a pleasure." She treated the hotel staff with exactly the same kindness she showed business leaders. One young waitress accidentally dropped a spoon while serving drinks. Embarrassed, she quickly bent down to pick it up. Before she could, Achieng knelt beside her. "It's all right." The waitress looked up nervously. "I'm so sorry." "No apology needed." She handed the spoon back with a gentle smile. Jabari watched quietly. Nothing about her kindness changed simply because the room around her had become more luxurious. That was exactly why he loved her. Across the ballroom, Otieno saw the small interaction. A strange memory returned. Years earlier, Achieng had once done exactly the same thing during a company dinner. Back then, he had been embarrassed. Today, the most respected man in the room looked at her with admiration. For the first time in years, doubt entered Otieno's heart. Not about his wedding, about every decision that had led him here. And as the wedding ceremony prepared to begin, he still had no idea that the greatest revelation of the day had yet to unfold. The wedding ceremony was scheduled to begin at 11 o'clock. At exactly 11, the musicians took their places. The master of ceremonies welcomed everyone with a polished smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today as we celebrate the union of Mr. Otieno Odhiambo and Miss Zureen Jerry." Applause filled the ballroom. Yet something had changed. Only an hour earlier, every guest's attention had been fixed on the bride and groom. Now, curiosity lingered in every corner of the room. People kept glancing toward the front table, where Jabari and Achieng sat together. No one spoke openly about it, but everyone was wondering the same thing. How had the groom's humble ex-wife become the fiancée of one of Kenya's most admired billionaires? Otieno tried to concentrate on the ceremony. He repeated the greetings. He smiled for photographs. He greeted distant relatives, but his thoughts kept drifting toward Achieng. Every time he looked at her, he noticed something different. She wasn't watching him. She wasn't comparing herself to Zuri. She wasn't trying to draw attention. Instead, she listened attentively whenever the elderly guests spoke. She thanked every waiter who served her. She even complimented the musicians during a short break. It was exactly who she had always been. Only now, he was finally seeing it again. The ceremony continued until the officiant invited both families to offer short speeches before the exchange of vows. Zuri's father spoke first. He welcomed the guests. He praised the joining of two respected families. The audience applauded politely. Then, Otieno's company chairman approached the stage. He spoke about ambition, leadership, professional excellence. He described Otieno as one of the company's brightest rising stars. Again, applause filled the room. Otieno smiled proudly. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Or so he believed. As the chairman prepared to leave the stage, he suddenly looked toward the front table. His eyes widened slightly. "Before I continue," he smiled warmly, "I've just noticed Mr. Jabari Mwangi honoring us with his presence." The audience applauded enthusiastically. The chairman continued, "Mr. Mwangi has done extraordinary work supporting education, healthcare, and entrepreneurship throughout Kenya." More applause followed. "If Mr. Mwangi would be willing to say a few words, it would be a tremendous honor." The room immediately turned toward Jabari. Otieno's heart lifted. This was perfect. If Jabari praised the wedding publicly, the event would gain enormous prestige. Several guests began encouraging him. "Please, a few words." Jabari remained seated for a moment. Then he looked at Achieng. She smiled gently. "It's your decision." He nodded. Slowly he stood. The ballroom erupted into respectful applause. Jabari walked calmly toward the stage. No dramatic entrance, no arrogance, only quiet confidence. After thanking the chairman, he stood before the microphone. "Good morning, everyone." His voice was steady. "Thank you for welcoming me today." He paused briefly. "I did not originally plan to speak." A few guests smiled. But sometimes life creates moments that deserve honesty. The room became still. Jabari continued, "Many of you know me through business. Some know me through charitable work. But very few know why I accepted today's invitation." Otieno listened carefully. He expected something about friendship, business partnerships, respect between families. Instead, Jabari looked directly toward Achieng. "My reason is sitting in this room." Every head turned toward her. Achieng looked surprised. Jabari smiled warmly before continuing. "Several months ago, my father collapsed alone during a violent storm. His father's name immediately caught people's attention. Cars passed him. Pedestrians walked by. Most people chose convenience over compassion." The ballroom remained silent. One woman stopped. He paused. She had very little. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't powerful. She had every reason to keep walking. But she didn't. Several guests leaned forward. Jabari continued quietly. "Yo." She called for help. She paid for transportation herself. She stayed beside a complete stranger until doctors took over. Then she quietly disappeared without leaving her name. The room had become completely silent. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. My father survived because one person decided another human life mattered. He slowly turned toward Achieng. That person was Achieng Otieno. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Otieno stared in disbelief. Zuri slowly looked toward Achieng. Neither had expected this. Jabari continued, "My investigators searched for weeks before finding her. When I finally met her," he smiled softly, "I discovered that saving my father's life wasn't extraordinary for her. It was simply who she was." He began walking slowly across the stage. "I watched her feed hungry children. I watched her help strangers. I watched her refuse recognition for every good deed. I watched her work honestly. I watched her rebuild her own life after unimaginable heartbreak." He stopped, without bitterness. The final two words echoed across the room. Then Jabari looked toward Otieno, not with anger, not with accusation, simply with sincerity. I've learned something from Achieng. We often admire people because they're successful. But success without character eventually becomes empty. Several guests lowered their eyes. He continued. Character, however, creates success that money cannot buy. Applause began slowly, then grew louder. Many guests stood. Within seconds, nearly half the ballroom was on its feet, not because Jabari was wealthy, because every word felt true. Achieng remained seated. Tears quietly filled her eyes. She had never wanted public recognition. She had never imagined becoming the center of attention. She simply wished to live honestly. When the applause finally softened, Jabari smiled again. I also owe everyone here another truth. He looked toward Achieng. I asked this remarkable woman to marry me, and she graciously said yes. The ballroom erupted once more. This time nearly everyone stood. Guests applauded enthusiastically. Several women wiped tears from their eyes. Mama Atieno openly cried. Naliaka covered her mouth in amazement, despite already knowing about the engagement. She had never expected Jabari to reveal it this way. Reporters hurriedly scribbled notes. Television crews adjusted their cameras. This wedding had transformed into a completely different story. Not about wealth, about dignity, about kindness, about second chances. Only two people remained completely motionless, Otieno and Zuri. Otieno felt his carefully constructed image beginning to crack. Everything he had believed about status suddenly seemed fragile. He had invited Achieng, hoping to prove she had lost everything. Instead, the entire ballroom now admired the woman he had abandoned. Zuri quietly watched him. She wasn't looking at Achieng anymore. She was looking at the expression on Otieno's face. There was no happiness, no joy, only regret. For the first time since accepting his proposal, an uncomfortable question entered her mind. If today was supposed to celebrate their future, why couldn't the groom stop looking at his past? And before anyone realized it, that question was about to change everything. The applause slowly faded, but the atmosphere inside the Grand Royal Hotel never returned to what it had been. Only an hour earlier, guests had admired elegant decorations, expensive floral arrangements, and the prestige surrounding Otieno and Zuri's wedding. Now, no one was discussing the crystal chandeliers. No one cared about the imported flowers. Every conversation centered on one woman, Achieng Atieno, the woman many had never heard of before that morning. The woman whose quiet compassion had earned the respect of the most influential businessman in the room. As Jabari returned to his seat beside Achieng, guests approached one after another. Some wanted to congratulate them. Others simply wanted to shake Achieng's hand. A governor's wife smiled warmly. I've attended charity events for years. I've heard people praise generosity. But today, she gently squeezed Achieng's hand. I finally met someone who lives it. Achieng smiled humbly. Thank you. I've only tried to do what anyone should. The woman shook her head. Unfortunately, not everyone does. Across the ballroom, Otieno watched silently. He remembered another day many years earlier. His first month at Kiongozi capital. He had forgotten his wallet at home. Embarrassed, he had called Achieng. Without hesitation, she had taken 3 buses across Nairobi just to bring him lunch and enough money to get home. She never complained. She never mentioned the inconvenience. She simply smiled and said, "We're a team." At the time, he had thanked her. Later, he had become embarrassed by her. Now those memories returned one after another like waves crashing against a shore. Kevin quietly stood beside him. You should sit down. I'm fine. No. Kevin lowered his voice. You don't look fine. Otieno stared across the ballroom. I don't understand. What? How did she become? He couldn't finish the sentence. Kevin answered for him. The woman everyone respects. Otieno slowly nodded. Kevin sighed. Maybe. He paused carefully. She was always that woman. Otieno looked at him. You just stopped seeing her. Those words struck harder than any accusation. Meanwhile, Zuri remained seated near the bridal table, silently watching the room. She noticed something she had ignored for months. Every time someone congratulated Achieng, the woman responded with genuine warmth. Every time someone complimented Jabari, he redirected attention back to Achieng. Neither seemed interested in status. Neither competed for attention. Their affection appeared effortless, natural. She slowly turned toward Otieno. He hadn't smiled in nearly 20 minutes. His eyes rarely left Achieng. A quiet uneasiness settled inside her heart. The officiant attempted to continue the wedding schedule. Ladies and gentlemen. His voice sounded uncertain. Perhaps we should proceed with the exchange of vows. Guests politely returned to their seats, yet the energy had changed completely. Otieno stepped forward. The officiant smiled encouragingly. Please repeat after me. Otieno barely heard him. His thoughts drifted elsewhere. He remembered Achieng sitting beside him in their tiny apartment years ago. She had stayed awake until 2 in the morning, helping him organize documents before an important interview. She had practiced interview questions with him for hours. When he doubted himself, she simply smiled. You already have everything you need. You just don't believe it yet. He had succeeded because she believed first. The officiant repeated the words. Otieno. Otieno blinked. I'm sorry. The audience shifted uncomfortably. The officiant smiled politely. We'll begin again. Otieno. Again. Silence. His voice refused to come. Across the room, whispers quietly spread. Is he all right? He seems distracted. Something's wrong. Zuri looked directly into his eyes. For the first time since they met, she saw uncertainty instead of ambition. She gently reached for his hand. It felt cold. Otieno. He looked at her. I'm here. But his voice lacked conviction. At that exact moment, an elderly woman slowly stood from the 3rd row. Few guests recognized her. She was Mama Beatrice, the elderly neighbor who had lived next door to Achieng and Otieno during the first years of their marriage in Nairobi. She had attended because Otieno's mother had invited several longtime family friends. Without asking permission, she quietly walked toward the front. May I say something? The officiant hesitated. Otieno's mother looked surprised. But before anyone objected, Jabari nodded respectfully. The room became silent. Mama Beatrice smiled sadly. I've listened to many beautiful speeches today. She looked toward Achieng. They reminded me of something. Her voice trembled slightly with age. I remember when these 2 young people first arrived in Nairobi. She pointed gently toward Otieno and Achieng. They owned almost nothing. The roof leaked. They shared one small room. They often had only enough food for one person. Several guests listened attentively. I also remember who quietly carried that family. She turned toward Otieno. Young man, you probably don't know this. There were evenings when Achieng pretended she had already eaten, so you could finish the last plate of food. Otieno slowly lowered his eyes. The elderly woman continued. She sold the necklace her late father gave her, so you could continue your education. Gasps echoed softly across the ballroom. She washed clothes until midnight. So you could pay examination fees. She prayed for you every morning, so your dreams would come true. Tears gathered in the old woman's eyes, and every single time someone praised your success, she smiled as though it belonged to both of you. Complete silence filled the room. No one moved, no one interrupted. Mama Beatrice looked around slowly. I am old. I've lived long enough to know something. She gently pointed toward Achieng. A person's greatest wealth is not found in their bank account. It is found in how many lives become better because they existed. She smiled warmly at Achieng. My daughter, you became wealthy long before anyone gave you money. The room erupted into heartfelt applause. Not loud, not dramatic, deep, sincere. Several guests stood again. Even some of Otieno's colleagues wiped tears from their eyes. One senior executive quietly whispered to another, "We promoted the wrong person." The other nodded. I was thinking exactly the same thing. Zuri heard them. She also noticed something else. Otieno was crying, not loudly, not dramatically, just silently. His shoulders trembled slightly. She had never seen him cry, not even when closing difficult business deals, not during stressful negotiations. But now, one elderly woman's memories had broken through years of carefully built pride. Zuri finally understood. The problem wasn't that Achieng had arrived with a billionaire. The problem was much deeper. The man standing beside her had recognized the treasure Otieno himself had thrown away. And as that realization spread through the ballroom, Zuri quietly removed her engagement ring. She looked at it for several long seconds. Then she closed her hand around it. Without saying a single word, a heavy silence settled over the ballroom after Mama Beatrice returned to her seat. No one hurried to continue the ceremony. No one reached for another glass of champagne. The atmosphere had become too honest for celebration. The officiant looked uncertainly between the bride and groom. We can continue whenever you're ready. But no one moved. Otieno remained standing before the altar, staring at the polished wooden floor. For the first time in many years, he was no longer thinking about promotions, expensive suits, influential connections, or public image. He was thinking about a tiny apartment with a leaking roof. He remembered coming home exhausted after failing another job interview. Achieng had greeted him with a smile, even though she had worked 3 different jobs that day. It's all right, she had whispered while serving him dinner. Tomorrow is another opportunity. He remembered becoming sick with malaria during their 2nd year in Nairobi. Achieng had stayed awake beside him for 3 nights, placing cool cloths on his forehead and feeding him medicine. She had missed work and lost wages without complaining once. He remembered graduating from his final professional certification course. Everyone had congratulated him, but afterward, he had found Achieng standing quietly at the back of the hall, crying tears of joy. My husband did it, she had proudly told complete strangers. Not once had she claimed any credit, yet without her, none of it would have happened. Those memories struck him one after another, until breathing itself became difficult. Across the room, Zuri watched him carefully. She finally understood why his expression had changed the moment Achieng entered the ballroom. This wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about lingering romance. It was about regret. Deep, overwhelming regret. She slowly stood. The sound of her chair sliding across the floor echoed through the silent ballroom. Every guest looked toward her. She walked calmly until she stood beside Otieno. For several seconds, she simply looked at him. Then she spoke quietly enough that only the nearest guests could hear. Tell me the truth. Otieno slowly raised his eyes. Do you still love her? His lips parted, but no words came. Zuri nodded sadly. I already have my answer. She took a deep breath before turning toward the officiant. I'm sorry. The officiant looked confused. For what? I can't continue. Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Her father immediately stood. Zuri. She gently raised her hand. Please. She turned back toward Otieno. I agreed to marry the man I believed you were. Her voice remained calm. But today, she glanced toward Achieng. I have met the woman who helped create the man you became. She looked back at Otieno, and I've realized something. What? You don't deserve punishment. You deserve honesty. She slowly removed her engagement ring. I don't want to spend my life wondering whether your heart is somewhere else. Otieno shook his head. No. Please don't. Tears gathered in Zuri's eyes. I'm not angry. I'm grateful. For what? That I discovered the truth before making a lifelong promise. She gently placed the ring into his trembling hand. I hope one day you become the man she believed you could be. Then, without another word, she embraced her parents and quietly walked down the aisle. No dramatic outburst, no shouting, only dignity. The ballroom remained silent until the doors closed behind her. Several guests lowered their heads respectfully. Even those who barely knew her admired the grace with which she had left. Otieno stood motionless. The wedding he had spent months planning had ended before the vows were spoken. Yet strangely, the loss of the ceremony no longer felt like the greatest tragedy. The greatest tragedy had happened years earlier, when he abandoned the woman who had loved him without conditions. Finally, he turned. His eyes searched the room until they found Achieng. She had remained seated beside Jabari the entire time. There was no satisfaction on her face, no triumph, only quiet compassion. Otieno slowly walked toward her. Each step felt heavier than the last. Guests instinctively moved aside. No one interrupted. No one whispered. They simply watched. When he finally stood before Achieng, his voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm sorry. She looked at him calmly. I know. He blinked. You know. I've known for a long time. Tears rolled down his face. I destroyed everything. You made painful choices. I don't deserve forgiveness. She remained silent for a moment. Then she spoke gently. Forgiveness isn't something people deserve. It's something people choose. He stared at her. I hated myself after I left you. She shook her head softly. No, you convinced yourself that success required leaving me behind. He lowered his head. I thought wealth would make me happy. And did it? He couldn't answer, because everyone in the room already knew. She continued quietly. I spent many months asking why you left. And then, one day I realized I was asking the wrong question. He looked at her. What was the right question? Who would I become after you left? A faint smile appeared on her face. I decided I wouldn't let pain make me cruel. Several guests quietly wiped away tears. Otieno struggled to speak. I don't expect another chance. There isn't one. Her answer was gentle, but clear. The woman who waited for you. She paused. No longer exists. He nodded slowly. I know, but I truly hope, she looked into his eyes, that this becomes the day your life changes, not because you lost me, but because you finally found yourself. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Healing. Jabari then stepped forward. For a brief moment, many guests expected confrontation. Instead, Jabari extended his hand. Otieno looked surprised. You don't owe me this. No. I don't. Jabari smiled kindly. But carrying resentment would only dishonor the woman I love. Otieno slowly accepted the handshake. His voice trembled. Take care of her. Jabari glanced toward Achieng. I promise. There was something profoundly powerful about that simple exchange. No insults, no revenge, no humiliation, only maturity, only dignity, only closure. Mama Beatrice quietly whispered to the woman beside her, This is what real wealth looks like. Outside the ballroom, sunlight poured through the hotel's tall glass windows. Inside, many guests realized they had witnessed something far greater than a wedding. They had witnessed the victory of character over pride, of compassion over arrogance, of forgiveness over revenge. As Achieng and Jabari slowly walked toward the exit together, nearly every guest stood, not because tradition demanded it, because respect did. They applauded quietly as the couple passed. Achieng smiled at the hotel staff. She thanked the musicians. She wished the waiters a good afternoon. She left exactly as she had entered, treating everyone with equal kindness. Otieno remained standing alone near the altar, watching the woman he had once underestimated disappear through the ballroom doors. For the first time in his life, he understood that the greatest loss was never the wedding that had just ended. It was the extraordinary woman he had failed to value when she had once walked beside him every single day. The headlines the following morning spread across Kenya faster than anyone expected. Billionaire honors unknown hero at society wedding. Bride walks away. After emotional truth changes ceremony. The woman who saved a stranger without knowing he was a billionaire. Curiously, very few newspapers focused on the failed wedding itself. Instead, journalists wrote about compassion, about humility, about the remarkable woman whose quiet acts of kindness had transformed countless lives without seeking recognition. Television stations replayed Jabari's speech. Radio hosts discussed whether success should be measured by wealth or by character. Across Nairobi, strangers shared Achieng's story with friends, co-workers, and family members. Many had never met her. Yet somehow they felt as though they already knew her. 1 week later, life slowly began returning to normal, or at least to a new version of normal. Achieng continued working at the Mwanga Community Foundation. She insisted on arriving early every morning. She still greeted the security guards by name. She still shared tea with the cleaners before beginning her workday. Nothing about her daily routine changed simply because newspapers had begun calling her the woman with the golden heart. One afternoon, Miriam smiled as she watched Achieng organizing scholarship files. You know, what? Most people become different after receiving this much attention. Achieng laughed softly. I still have paperwork waiting for me. Exactly my point. She looked around the office. I don't want people remembering me because I appeared in newspapers. What do you want? I want children to finish school. I want clinics to receive medicine. I want widows to find work. If people remember me because those things happened, she smiled. That will be enough. Across town, Jabari watched her from the office doorway without interrupting. Every day, he discovered another reason to admire her. Not once had she asked for a luxury office. Not once had she requested special treatment because she was engaged to the foundation's chairman. In fact, she insisted that nobody at work should receive favors because of their relationship. If I haven't earned something, she once told him, please don't give it to me. He had never respected anyone more. 3 months later, beneath a wide acacia tree overlooking Lake Naivasha, Jabari and Achieng exchanged wedding vows. Unlike the extravagant ceremony Otieno had planned, their celebration remained beautifully simple. Family members, close friends, children from the literacy program, employees from the foundation. the nurses who had treated Mz Daniel, even the taxi driver who had helped transport him to the hospital during the storm. Everyone present had played a meaningful role in their journey. There were no famous musicians, no television cameras, no unnecessary luxury, only genuine joy. When it came time for Jabari to speak his vows, he looked into Achieng's eyes and smiled. "The first gift you ever gave my family," he paused, "was saving my father's life. The greatest gift you've given me," his voice softened, "is teaching me that kindness becomes stronger when it's offered without expecting anything in return." Achieng's eyes filled with tears. When her turn came, she took a slow breath. "I once believed losing everything meant my life had ended." She smiled through happy tears. "But I discovered something." "What?" Jabari whispered. "Sometimes God removes the people who stop seeing your worth." She gently squeezed his hands. "So he can place you beside those who recognize it immediately." The guests applauded warmly. Mz Daniel quietly wiped away tears. Mama Atieno hugged Naliaka. Even the children smiled without fully understanding why the adults around them looked so emotional. Months passed. Together, Jabari and Achieng expanded the Mwanga Community Foundation. They opened scholarship programs in underserved communities, built small health centers in rural villages, created financial training for widows hoping to start businesses. Every project carried the same philosophy: treat people with dignity first. Everything else follows. Achieng personally visited many of the communities they supported. She preferred speaking directly with mothers, teachers, and children rather than attending formal ceremonies. Whenever someone thanked her, she answered the same way: "Help someone else when you have the chance. That's enough." Meanwhile, Otieno's life became much quieter. After the failed wedding, he requested extended leave from work. Not because the company dismissed him, because he finally understood he needed to confront the man he had become. Months later, he visited Kisumu alone. He walked through Kibuye Market, where he had first met Achieng years before. Many stalls had changed. Some vendors remembered him, others didn't. He stopped near the place where she had once sold vegetables beside her mother. The space was occupied by a young woman selling tomatoes. She smiled politely. "Can I help you?" Otieno looked around slowly. "No." He smiled sadly. "I was just remembering someone." The young vendor nodded. "Good memories." He hesitated. "The best." "And the most painful?" That afternoon, he visited Achieng's mother's home. He carried no gifts, no expensive suit, only sincerity. Her mother welcomed him politely. She listened quietly as he apologized for the pain he had caused. When he finished speaking, she poured him another cup of tea. "My daughter has already forgiven you." He lowered his eyes. "I know, but I haven't forgiven myself." The elderly woman smiled gently. "Then stop living in yesterday." He looked up. "You still have time to become a better man." He nodded silently. For the first time in many years, he believed that redemption was possible, not through wealth, not through status, but through the choices he would make from that day forward. 1 year later, Achieng and Jabari returned to the same hotel where everything had changed, not for a celebration. The Mwanga Community Foundation had purchased one of the hotel's conference halls for a fundraising event supporting scholarships for orphaned children. As guests arrived, one of the hotel employees quietly approached Achieng. "I've wanted to thank you." She looked surprised. "For what?" "I was the waitress who dropped the spoon during that wedding." Achieng smiled as she remembered. "You helped me when everyone important was watching." The young woman laughed. "I'll never forget that." "Because of you." She hesitated. "I started volunteering on weekends." Achieng's eyes brightened. Really, I realized kindness spreads. She nodded toward several young volunteers arranging books for children. They're here because someone once helped me. Achieng smiled. Then you understand. What? The world changes one person at a time. As the evening sun settled over Nairobi, she stood beside Jabari, watching dozens of children laughing together outside the conference hall. She quietly slipped her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She smiled peacefully. "I'm thinking that life has a beautiful way of surprising us." "It does." "I once walked into this building carrying heartbreak." She looked toward the children. "Today," she smiled, "I walk out carrying hope." Jabari gently kissed her forehead. "And you'll spend the rest of your life giving that hope to others." She nodded. Together. They walked toward the waiting children, leaving behind every painful memory that had once defined them, not because the past had disappeared, but because love, forgiveness, and quiet courage had finally become stronger than it. Every life is shaped by the choices we make when no one is watching. Wealth can open doors, success can earn applause, and power can command attention, but none of these can replace a heart that chooses compassion over pride. Achieng never became extraordinary because she married a billionaire. She became extraordinary the moment she decided that pain would never steal her kindness. That choice changed her own future and inspired countless others to do the same. Perhaps someone has underestimated you. Perhaps you've been rejected, abandoned, or made to feel that your worth depends on what you own or who stands beside you. If so, remember this story. Your value is not determined by the people who walk away. It is revealed by the character you keep when life becomes difficult. The people who truly belong in your life will recognize your heart long before they notice your success. If this story touched you, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment when kindness changed your life, or when someone believed in you after everyone else had given up? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story may encourage someone who needs hope today. If you enjoyed this journey of justice, healing, and second chances, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends and family. Together, we can continue spreading stories that remind us all that kindness is never wasted, and that the greatest victories in life are won not through wealth, but through love, integrity,